Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Movie Mates podcast. I am Matthew, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Callum.
Hey man, lovely to see you. So, as you've seen by the title, I think it's the 75th episode of the podcast, around that, maybe like 75, 76.
Ooh.
So we're getting there, and we're doing the Cornetto Trilogy, starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. So I'm going to pass over to Callum to explain what three movies that entails. So Callum, off to you, man.
So this is an anthology series, spanning from I've painted myself into a corner now. I think it was 2004 to 2013. So they're three non-connected films, other than the fact that it has the Cornetto product placement. They're all directed by Edgar Wright and starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, as you said. And Martin Freeman sneaks in there
He
every time.
does, yes. Oh yeah, that's a good
You
point.
know,
Actually, that's a good point.
in varying sizes of roles, but fuck my life. The three films that we're going to be talking about are Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. These are all films that I'd seen before, and I believe you had too.
Yeah,
We both had not so stellar opinions of The World's End, but I feel like we both warmed to it a bit
I
more.
absolutely 100%, 100%. But yeah, like as you said, it's kind of rare these days that you have something as charming as the Cornetto trilogy. None of them are so connected as such, but they all have the same cast, the same sort of production team, same director. So it's refreshing to see, and I'm really looking forward to getting in there, because there's a lot of different genres in here as well. To be fair,
Mm.
zombie films, like a police crime one, and then sort of like a science fiction type. So there's a lot of different genres mixed in there. So gonna be good fun. But just before we kick off today's podcast, thanks everyone so much for supporting us recently. We really do appreciate that. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on any of the Cornetto trilogy films down below. We'd love to hear them. And our email is always down in the description, moviematspodcast@gmail.com. So first film, Bud, 2004, it was Shaun of the Dead, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to just generally speak about the trilogy, because I think it's a rare occurrence that both of us have seen all of the films before we review them.
Yeah,
So I think it's a rare occurrence, and it might be nice to talk about our maybe a bit of history with them.
absolutely.
In my opinion, after having rewatched these, I always ask myself who's my favorite director, and if you'd asked me before, I probably would have said Rob Reiner, Misery and When Harry Met
Sure.
Sally,
Mhm.
or Jon Favreau. No explanation needed. Uh,
Love it.
but I do think Edgar Wright is one of my favorite directors. Like after having rewatched these, I just think that the comedic dialogue and the visual humor is balanced so well, and like the fact that he's able to do both of those without using slapstick is probably better than any
Even
other
better.
comedy
Yeah.
director out
Yeah.
there, really.
I think Edgar Wright's one of those directors, Callum, isn't he, where like you can definitely recognize an Edgar Wright film when you see it. Like he's got a very distinct style, and like as you said, sort of that editing, quick editing, and sort of obviously the same cast used as well. But yeah,
Mm.
I remember watching Shaun of the Dead a few years ago, loved it. Hot Fuzz, I watched a few years ago, loved it, and then World's End, I didn't have as a strong reception to that one, but it's definitely warmed up. I've definitely warmed up to it since then. But yeah, like you're sort of saying, Edgar Wright's definitely up there. One of my favorite directors, I think. After rewatching these three films, I mean, they're really well done. Really well done.
And generally, I wouldn't be a particular fan of anthology series. That
Mhm.
this is probably one of the very few sort of successful examples of an anthology. There's Black Mirror, which is very successful, American Horror Story, which is very successful,
Mhm.
and there's this. So I hadn't really taken to that kind of genre before, but I just love each of these films individually, and I think you know potentially billing them as a trilogy leads to disappointment, because the characters within the films are so likable, and the writing by Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright, are like it's kind of just a shame that these characters are one offs.
I
Like,
agree,
do you
hundred
sort of
percent.
feel that sentiment?
Part of me is sort of, it's kind of like the scenario wherein the movies are that good, you kind of don't want a sequel just in case it's ruined. But then again, the fact that you only get to see these characters one time, as you said, it is kind of a bummer, because they're all so great, like they're all so different as well. And that's the testament, I think. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, for the most part, they're spectacular. And what I really like about these films is they have a really nice, like, I don't know, I don't really know how to describe this, but like a Britishness to it. Like it's sort of like a very British film in the sense that like there's so many actors from like British TV shows in these films, like Doctor Who and stuff. Like there must be at least a combination of 10 or more between these three films, I think. And I knew that's not even counting other British TV shows, but yeah, like it's sort of British humor with like an American style, I think. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's part of the charm to it.
Mm. Yeah, and Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz are both sort of. I mean, they obviously look fantastic, but they're sort of filmed on not the best quality of equipment, and it sort of feels like this, like humble, sort of British sitcom.
Yeah, it does,
But then
doesn't
you
it?
go to like The World's End, and it sort of feels a bit inauthentically Edgar Wright. It feels more like Baby Driver, where it has like this American sheen to it, that sort of makes it feel a bit off.
Yeah.
Like whenever we talked about yesterday, I sort of asked our friend Ben, who's a massive, who's a massive fan of the Beatles,
Yeah.
whether he had been a fan of the film, and he said, I think he hadn't even watched it because from what he had seen, it just felt so sort of sanitized and American. Whenever it was
Yeah, I
taking,
remember him saying that,
this
yeah.
iconic British thing, and then they were
Yeah.
sort of twisting it, into an Americanism, and I
Mm.
sort of felt that with The World's End for whatever reason,
Yeah,
and obviously Baby Driver is a much more apparent example.
it's a really good point actually, because I think out of the three, The World's End feels the most mismatched. I think, like you said, it's shot differently. Even the action, it's very, how do I put it? It's very Kingsman-esque. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's very sort of like it's sort of how I would compare it to the Kingsman, in the sense that it's sort of a British film, but it's been heavily Americanized. And that's not necessarily a critique. It's just something that it's definitely maybe doesn't fit as well as the other two films in that trilogy specifically. But that being said, I think the editing throughout these three films, like it slowly gets less Edgar Wright-y, if that sort of makes sense as well. The World's End has very little of his sort of creative edits in there as well. There is still some there, of course. It's an Edgar Wright film, but yeah, I think you're right, buddy. I think that Americanism is definitely a good observation for sure.
Yeah, and when it comes to a franchise, I would say when watching these films, it's never been more apparent to me that like both the age of the audience and the number of times that you viewed it, drastically changes, your experience of the film.
Yeah.
I would say being 18, watching, even The World's End, or picking up on some of the humor of Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead, I think it massively changed how I viewed the films. Shaun of the Dead, I'd sort of said to you off the podcast, I never had an opinion about it, and The World's End, I actually had a negative opinion about it. But it's drastically changed. Now I haven't
Yeah,
seen them multiple times, and I think my age was a factor.
I
Did
agree.
you get that at all?
Yeah, it's one of it's one of those trilogies, I think, Bud, where like it's kind of a staple for like young adults. I think if you showed this to a young adult, like it's a very sort of young adult type anthology, even though like the protagonists are like characters having a midlife crisis, you know what I mean? But I think that's one of the strengths here, because like you said, the humor, I remember when I first saw Shaun of the Dead as well, I didn't get all the humor or all the references. But here, I the fact that like you sort of said, buddy, we're older now, we can sort of comprehend it better. It's such a great feeling to sort of finally understand the film, and how, and even over the couple of years that we've done the podcast, the more and more we watch films, I think the more and more we have sort of reviewer kind of analytical minds when watching these films. That can be a blessing and a curse, I suppose, but especially here,
Yeah.
like you can understand how well directed it is, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like you can understand the amount of hassle that would have went into each scene just to make it perfect.
Yeah, I feel like that sort of mindset is helpful whenever you're either watching a fantastic film or a terrible film. But if
Yes,
you're sort of
yes.
just watching like a middling one that you just want to sit down and enjoy, you're like, oh, this is shit, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it just does sort of ruin the fun
it
of just
does.
watching a film for the sake of it. Like
It does.
I, to be fair, like would you say you watch a lot of films outside of the podcast?
I usually have, you know me very well, like I usually have those films that I go back to a lot.
Yep.
And but no, I usually I'm usually more of like a either like a TV show kind of guy off the podcast, or a rom-com. It doesn't usually stray much
Hmm.
further than that, really. What about yourself, Callum? I know you're a huge TV show guy as well, more than me. So
Yeah, I would say I'm probably bigger on TV shows than films, but I would say outside of call, outside of the films that we watch for the podcast, I do watch films, every day. Uh, I would say yeah, I do watch films every day, but they do vary in quality. Well, I
Yeah,
usually make the conscious choice of like which films are we never going to cover on this podcast, and then those will be the ones that I
sure.
watch because then I can just completely switch off and just be like, well,
Yeah.
I don't need to give any thoughts about this. Whenever Christmas rolls around and they pull out the Princess Switch switched again, I'm just like I'm
Yeah,
like
yeah,
even if
no,
we do talk about this, I'll happily watch this again.
sure,
Like it's
sure.
fun trash.
Yeah.
That's sort of the genre that I go to most often. I'd say outside of the podcast.
Yeah, like you know what it is, buddy. I kind of, whenever I watch a film outside the podcast that we're not reviewing that week, I find it really unnatural these days not to be writing notes about it. I don't know if you get like that as
Mm,
well. It's so
yeah.
strange. Like I think I sat down the other day and started watching. There was like a Christmas rom-com on Netflix called Let It Snow, I think. With
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
yeah, it's actually quite good to be fair.
Yeah.
And it was so weird not making notes in that one. And I think I was watching like The Awkward Moment with like Michael B. Jordan, Zac Efron,
Oh,
and
I
Miles
love that one.
Teller.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
yeah, is there any
Have
other?
have you have you ever have you
Mhm.
ever like watched a film, assumed that we're going to talk about it on the podcast, made notes, and then we didn't?
Never, never. Have you done that? You definitely have
Yeah,
done
yeah,
that.
that's happened. Yeah, but then like sometimes I make
Oh
notes and I'm
man.
like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't know how we can talk about this film, without sounding insensitive or something. Like, I was watching your video on the channel about the biggest surprise cameos,
Oh
and
yeah,
you
yeah,
were talking
yeah.
about Tom Cruise and Tropic Thunder, which we had watched together,
How do we fit that in?
a
No, because that's
few
one of
months
our
ago.
favorites. Like, how do we fit that in?
Well, I was just gonna say, you said at the end, oh, and then hopefully we'll talk about that sometime soon. I'm like, how do we talk about
Yes,
that film?
I know,
It's
I
like
know. It's a difficult one to
I
talk
don't know
about.
how you can talk about that film,
I
with
know.
obviously Robert Downey
Yes,
Jr.'s character.
yes, of course, of course. It's definitely a difficult one to talk about for sure. I don't know how we're gonna fit that in. It's a film. I'll be honest, man. I think a lot of people have sort of stayed away from reviewing that film on purpose. Well, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of reviews online on that one, but yeah. Is there any other general remarks in the anthology, buddy, before we kick off with Shaun of the Dead from you?
No, I'm good to go right
Nice
in.
one. Well, sort of what my opening remarks sort of based on this were, this is so incredibly charming. It's very British. There's a lot of C words in there as well, which it's so
Love it.
it's always weird, like in an American film where you hear the C word said by an American, like it doesn't sound right, but here it's said by Nick
Jake
Frost's
Paul,
character.
Conor McGregor.
Yeah, yeah, no, literally. But here it's said quite a few times by Nick Frost's character Ed, who is it's one of my favorites. And one thing about this film, I think it kind of reminds me in a weird sense to like American Beauty, in the idea that it sort of I know that's a weird comparison, but it kind of shows the hollowness of suburban existence. Really, do you know what I mean? Like, there's always just like the routine of Shaun just going to the shops. Like, he gets hit by a ball, trips over the pavement, goes into the shop, buys a Coke, and goes out. Like, it's so like he
Yeah.
just obviously hates his life, not hates it, but he just got into a routine. I mean, he doesn't even understand that, like, the second time that scene plays again, that there's a zombie apocalypse happening. You know what I mean? Like, it's perfect.
Yeah, Edgar Wright is clearly big on existentialism and just questioning whether your life is worth living
Big
at that
time.
moment in time.
Big time,
You
yeah.
know how he portrays, as you said, like monotony in the workplace, where you're just there to survive, and you just slip into the routine where you don't notice anything horrific happening around you, and it's a bit of a similar character to the character Gary King within
Yeah,
the
World's
World's
End.
End.
Yeah, yeah,
But
it is
we'll go and
absolutely.
talk about that. And if you want to talk about quickly about the genre of the film,
Yes.
obviously Edgar Wright likes doing sort of genre pieces with a twist. In this film, it's a zombie film, and I would say before this, I haven't actually liked a zombie film itself. The closest thing I would say was the TV show iZombie, and I think the thing that those two have in common isn't like the focus on like zombie horror, but on comedy. Uh, and I think it's imperative because zombies clearly make terrible villains. There's no nuance or personality or even dialogue
Yeah,
when it comes to zombies. So I feel like there needs to be comedy.
I
I tried
agree. I
watching The
agree.
Walking Dead and I watched it for 2 seasons and it's just
It
dreadful.
takes itself a bit seriously for my liking. I think I think zombies, like you said, buddy, there's perfectly actually, there's no nuance there. It's what you see is what you get, you know what I mean? But here it's definitely spiced up with the sense of humor that's added, and it's actually balanced by the fact that, I don't know how, like, there's no real screen time spent just with the zombies themselves. It's always with the human characters, so that really helps make the pacing of the film like great, in my opinion. Like, because it's always with those human characters, it's great. And yeah, like I think you're right though, buddy. I think the zombie genre definitely has to be sort of revitalized, because I think it could be like the new westerns, to be honest, man. I think zombies could be the dying trend.
Ooh.
No pun intended there, but yeah.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say, because obviously with your wait, you think they're a dying breed, you say?
I think zombie films could be, yeah.
I mean, I recall a video that you made recently entitled "Westerns Are Back." So
Yes, I
do
think
you
westerns
think
could
that
be
the
back on.
zombie genre can come back?
I think it definitely could come back. Yeah, like the westerns have sort of had a more of a modern reinterpretation. But I don't know. I think zombie films definitely, of course, they've been popular for years. So I suppose why couldn't they come back? But I don't know. I think films like this where it's sort of balanced with the humor. It's what I would want in a zombie film. Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't take itself too seriously at all.
Yeah, I think that the thing that you need is a group dynamic, and preferably
Yeah.
comedic one. So I'm hoping that, like, this year, Netflix is releasing a new film, every week, and one of those releases will be Army of the Dead, directed by Zack Snyder and starring Dave Bautista.
Oh wow,
And
cool.
that's going to be, I think, more like a military group going after a group of zombies. So I'm hoping that the team dynamic sort of salvages that, and it doesn't just become,
Yeah.
like a World War Z, that kind of thing. But from memory, I did not enjoy this film whatsoever when I first watched it, and I think that's a lot to do with sort of being too immature for the humor. I just wanted to ask you, how was your first viewing experience for this?
I loved it first time, and I love it even more now. I think this is one of the best edited films I've ever seen, in the terms of the classic Edgar Wright style we've mentioned, and the dramatic cuts combined with really like intense music. And it kind of reminds me, the long sort of one shot takes when Shaun leaves his house to buy a cornetto or for Ed and stuff like that. It kind of reminded me of Don John, in the sense that from that film, there's a lot of repeated consistent routine in that film. And I thought
Yeah.
I actually love that here, because it's weird, buddy. I actually prefer movies where the characters are just doing everyday shit. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's so much more relatable. Like, if a character's just sitting in work all day, or sitting at home watching a movie or reading or something, it's so much better, I think, because you get to understand the characters better. And that's why I love this film. Sean, like, there's nothing. I think the film wants you to understand, like, there's nothing like, I don't. This is gonna. I don't want to sound insulting with this, but like, there's nothing special about his character. Like, he's supposed to be the everyman that you can relate to. I think
Hmm.
that's absolutely
Yeah.
nailed for sure.
Yeah, and sort of talking about sort of them doing more everyday tasks. I feel like that's where sort of the world's end really shines, and then they just absolutely bottle it.
I agree. I
Like
absolutely agree.
halfway through the film. But I feel like something that's very very integral to this film is the romance.
Yeah.
And this wasn't really something that I paid too close attention to on sort of my first two viewings of the film. But on this one, it's really present that this is in essence really a romantic comedy. Sort of under
Yeah.
all of it. But
Yeah.
I have just a bit of a diatribe, to
Go
get
for it.
through, because
Yeah.
I was just really wondering, in my mind. Obviously, I'm no relationship expert, but when it comes to the clear evidenced context of this film, Sean is evidently not a good boyfriend, and he makes empty promises and he makes mistakes. But it would be my assertion that Liz is also seemingly not a very good girlfriend, because she chose to be in this relationship with him, and she's desperately trying to change him. And she puts, like, every expectation, every onus on him to do something like proactive about the relationship. She says, "I don't want to go to the Winchester. I want to go to a nice restaurant." Then don't go to the Winchester and book a fucking restaurant
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like she's constantly expecting him to change, but not doing anything about it herself. You realize no one's forcing you to go to the Winchester, and
Yeah.
if you don't want to go, pick somewhere else.
It's a great point.
She's always like, "Well, I want to do that. I want to do something." He's like, "Well, what do you want to do?" She's like, "I don't know." And he's like, "Pub." And she's like, "Fuck you."
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
he's giving you the
Yeah.
opportunity. to choose, but okay.
Mhm.
Like, you know, I feel like, you know,
I
like
think, yeah.
you know, like he seemed happy enough to go to the restaurant, you know, for their anniversary. He just forgot, like it was a human mistake, but you know, I feel like
Yeah.
he gets unnecessarily punished for that.
I think he
And I
does.
think it's clear to me that it's best that they not be together, but I don't think that it should all be put on Shaun. And I was sort of shocked in the end that they actually ended up continuing the romance.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same, buddy. I'm exactly the same. I think the Liz character, you know, of course you do feel bad for Shaun throughout the film. You know, as you said, they're very human mistakes from a very human character, and I think you're right. I think it kind of surprised. I would actually have rather he didn't actually stay with Liz at the end. You know, I don't think that I didn't really feel that they were right together, but I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of a contrast in opinion to the masses. Maybe a lot of people think otherwise, but you know, I think, yeah, like I think you're right. I think this movie is such a great mash of genres, like you said. It's inherently, you know, a zombie film as by the title and the themes, but then it's also a romantic comedy with like the Liz and Shaun dynamic. So, yeah, I don't know. I think I really want to echo the words that you're saying there, dude. To be honest with you, I think you're spot on.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. You know, it may have been a better ending had they not ended up together, or maybe if you know, because obviously the film ends with Shaun continuing his friendship with Ed, but having him chained up as a zombie in the shed. So
Yeah,
maybe if she'd sort of presented an ultimatum, you know, like a choose between me and choose between her or Ed, and then him recognized that his friendship was more important than his relationship with her.
yeah.
You know, because there was sort of time and love there where there wasn't with Liz as such.
Mhm.
But I wanted to ask you, Matthew, because we're talking about a zombie film and we haven't really discussed this before. How would you fare in a zombie apocalypse?
Not very well, dude. I think I definitely. It's a good question, actually. A really good, interesting question. I think I'd probably adopt for the I don't know. I think you know, in zombie movies, like I think a group is always the safest option. But then again, like you get members of your group like David, who's just a knob. So I don't know. I don't know how I'd manage. Obviously, like being on your own wouldn't probably be the best. But I always think, you know, when you see in these apocalypse films, like I think a supermarket, just staying in a supermarket
Hmm.
for a while. You've got tin food there. You know, you've got stuff. So I think staying in like a Tesco's or a Sainsbury's or an Asda or something, somewhere like that, I'd probably do all right. But other than that, horribly. What about yourself, Mal? What would be your tactic?
Yeah, I've maybe been a bit unnecessarily harsh on the genre because I have just remembered that of course we've talked about the Zombieland films and they're both fantastic. But again, it's because it's a comedy. Like I feel like you know
Yeah,
otherwise you know zombie films do just fall flat.
yeah,
But I think that if the zombies you know if in real life you know this were to happen, I feel like if the zombies were as slow as the one in these films, I definitely would survive. But like, would you want to? Like, what kind of life are you
yeah.
leading?
I
You know,
know.
obviously this film ends with you know this film ends with the army coming in and you know it pretty much just being a 1 day event. But you know I feel like if that was you know if I was living in like The Walking Dead or Zombieland, I'd rather just not.
Yeah, I know what you mean, buddy, and that's part of the reason why I love this film. Do you know like the subtle references before the zombie apocalypse happens? Where, you know, like Sean's in the bus and people start coughing around him, and then he looks outside. There's like a zombie like chasing pigeons.
Yeah.
it's really great. And then, you know, one thing it kind of adds a little element of like horror in there as well, because like you see in the TV screens like every so often, like he works in an electrical shop, so on the TV screens like the news and stuff, it's saying about there's an outbreak, and it's kind of a bit jarring as well. Like it sort of reminded me a bit of Bird Box in that scenario. But you know, I think you're right, buddy. I think you're right. I think humor is really important for zombie films, especially, you know, the Zombieland films. They're some of my favorite zombie ones, actually.
And you know, obviously there are a few emotional hits within the film. You know, there's the death
Yeah.
of Philip, there's the death of Barbara. But I think because there's always like an underlying comedy, I'm sort of unsure about the emotional scenes. You know,
Yeah.
it was obviously lovely to see sort of the reconciliation between Shaun and Philip, and then Barbara's death was obviously meant to be poignant. But I feel like Simon Pegg,
Sean Pegg.
is fantastic in those scenes.
Yeah.
So I just have it written
You're
down as SP. So,
okay. You're right.
Simon Pegg is fuck you. Like Simon Pegg is fantastic in those scenes,
He is,
but I
yeah.
think because they're so organically funny, it's kind of hard to get behind the emotion of it.
Yeah, and also when there's like an emotional score in the background, it kind of makes me think like, is this movie trying to be funny? If you know what I mean. I don't know if it's trying to
Yeah,
be humorous or trying to make an emotional scene. I think is Barbara's his mum, isn't she?
Yes.
Yeah, like, I think
I'm
this.
sorry. Like I'm just looking something
You're all
up
right. I
on
think
my iPad.
I think when obviously when Barbara gets infected and she sort of like disclosed she hasn't told anyone that she's been bitten. I think that's quite a really heartbreaking realization because like she's one of my favorite characters in the film, and of course she's like a fairly popular actress from Doctor Who as well, from the David
And
Tennant thing,
Afterlife.
and Afterlife as well. Yeah, she's like a classic British actress, and I was kind of devastated when she, but then the film kind of makes that subverts that, but like it's revealed that like she's turned into a zombie, and then like Shaun has to like shoot her in the head. But
I
it's
don't know.
kind of
I feel like they were playing that for an emotional beat,
maybe I think maybe that's
but
one.
it did not come across
No, it
like
didn't.
that.
And yeah, I think in essence, I guess it's a comedy film as well, and maybe emotional scenes aren't its priority for sure. I can understand that, but I would have liked to see maybe a bit more emotional scenes. Like I think maybe the most emotional this trilogy gets is probably The World's End, and in that
I
sense.
think so.
But yeah, like I would have liked to see more in this film, but yeah.
And I was wonderfully happy in the moment in which David got eaten. And it
Oh,
was really
no
amazing
idea.
body horror, like having
Yeah,
all of his
it was so
insides
well
ripped
done.
out
It was
from
so
his
well done,
stomach.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it was genuinely disgusting. I loved every second of it because he was just an actual, as you said, knobhead.
Yeah, one of my favorite scenes in the film, buddy, is when the first zombie attacks Shaun and Ed's apartment, and they have to use their vinyl records to sort of like try and decapitate the zombie. I think that's such a really class.
A tear rolled down my cheek just thinking of
Literally,
like
literally, I'm
whenever he
like,
said that
oh
was
god.
an original pressing, I was just like, oh
Oh
god,
god, yeah, no, actually,
hard to watch.
it's one of it's one of the classic scenes in this film. Like, I think this film will be looked upon back in like 20 or 30 years as like a classic film. I think for me anyway, and there's scenes like that are just amazing, and there's some fantastic lines in here as well. Like there's one line uh where Shaun is in his mum's house, and then he obviously doesn't get along with Philip. It's supposed to be alluded to anyway, and then he goes, "Did you know on several occasions he touched me?" And then Barbara's like, "What?" And he's like, "Oh no, I just made that up. I don't know why I said that." That is one of the best lines ever in this trilogy. I love it. It's like, and it's sort of like it rides the line between like, oh, I can't believe that kind of made it into the script kind of thing. But
Yeah,
that being said, yeah, it's such a great comedy film as well. And Bill Nye, I mean, he's great, isn't he?
he is he is spectacular, yeah. And obviously towards the end of the film, Ed, Nick Frost's character, is bitten by a zombie, and that moment is sort of within an action sequence. So they don't really take the time, I think, to focus on that moment.
Yeah.
Like the music playing over, it's like high energy, adrenaline inducing.
Yeah, it is.
When
Yeah.
really I think it could have been a moment that was played a bit more poignantly.
I think so. Especially with such a main, like the second main character in the film, pretty much. It's kind of
Mm.
it's kind of devastating that like one thing about these Edgar Wright films, they never really have a truthfully like a really happy ending, so to speak. I mean, maybe Hot Fuzz does to a degree, but I mean, Shaun of the Dead doesn't really have a happy ending on the whole. When you think that he's lost his mum, maybe he's with Liz and everything's okay, but Ed is not. He's zombified to a degree, so it's kind of like a little bit devastating. Obviously, with The World's End, it's not really a perfect ending either, but yeah, I kind of respect that though as well. Like that they like he
Mm.
doesn't feel like he has to wrap it up in a nice little bow. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this film's ending is quite sweet. I'm glad that they didn't kill Ed, and even just for the sake of the happiness of the characters, I'm glad that they ended up in the relationship,
Yes, yes.
even though I feel like it's probably not the most healthy one. But I do think it's a sweet ending, and I would say they came out of that situation in the best possible scenario.
Yeah,
If you have a
that's a
zombie
good point.
apocalypse and like any of you survive, you're doing fairly well.
Yeah, that's a good point, but that's a good point. Any more remarks from you, Callum?
No, nothing
No.
else for me now.
I'd love to hear your rating, bud.
So it's kind of difficult because obviously this film is an anthology series, but it is billed as a trilogy. So I feel like a lot of these considerations will be in comparison to each other, which maybe isn't fair. But if you're talking about any other trilogy, you would say, oh well, this film wasn't as good as the second one, or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
third's the best, or whatever. So I feel like there is some consideration to be had in regards to that. because I do think this film is the second best of the trilogy. It's just behind Hot Fuzz just a little bit for me. I
I
know that
agree. I
this is
agree.
maybe I think this is your favorite of the three. But you know, when it comes to rating this out of 10, I feel like a 9 is probably where it's sitting at for me.
Yeah. I think I love what you said there, but I'm just going to echo what you're sort of saying there. I think this is probably one of the more charming ones out of the three. And I want to try and get away from me comparing it to the other two because, like you said, it's sort of they're not necessarily linked. So I think as a standalone film, I love how it mixes different genres. On the whole, like I suppose if we're going to mention the cast here now, because you know they're predominantly the same for the other three, stellar, like unreal, great tone, really great script. I'd probably give it a 9.5, I think, out of 10. Just not
Wonderful.
my favorite, actually. I know that's a bit of a hot take. It's not my favorite now anymore, but it's definitely up there. Definitely up there. The second film that we're going to talk about today is our favorite, I think, out of the three, and it's
Ooh.
Hot
Has,
Fuzz.
has has your opinion shifted on
It
rewatch?
has, it has. You know, I remember watching this film on Christmas Day, I think, a few years ago, and I still loved it that then. But watching it now, I mean, I think this is one of the best, like one of the best comedy films in the last 10 or 20 years. I really do love this film so much, and it's down to the fact that it's like I really love like sort of British crime shows. Like it kind of reminds me of like an episode of Midsummer Murders or something like that.
Mm,
Kind of old school crime.
yeah.
And I think this is what I just love the idea of like a village setting where everyone in the village is like corrupt. There's like a serial killer on the loose in the village. Like I love that kind of those kind of scenarios, and that's why I love this film so much, man. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think this one is maybe a bit more of a challenge to talk about because it does have the strongest narrative, I think, but also it's probably the funniest. So a lot of my notes are
Yeah,
just, oh, here was this joke. How funny was
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah,
I feel like that's maybe not the
yeah.
most interesting thing to hear. But I think that the genius of Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg's writing is the structure and the foreshadowing. It was obviously present in Shaun of the Dead and sort of the scene that you mentioned where it has the two parallel scenes of him walking through the street,
Hmm.
and there being you know just a regular day and then absolute chaos, and here that there's obviously that built throughout the film. And what one piece that I never picked up on until my rewatch the other day was the fact that they in the initial meeting that Nicholas Angel has with the sort of heads of the police, that they say that the head of police is capable of making people disappear, which is obviously then echoed with the head of the police in Sanford. I
Sanford, yeah.
forgot it for a second.
You got it. You nailed it. Yeah, I think that's really interesting detail, actually, buddy. And this film is probably the most Easter egg packed out of the three, I think. Even in terms of like celebrity appearances. Now, I wasn't sure about this, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. You've mentioned the celebrity cameo video that was on the channel.
Mhm.
Was that Kate Blanchett as Nicholas Angel's wife
Well, she was never his wife,
or
but yes,
girlfriend?
that was Kate
Yeah,
Blanchett.
that's really interesting. I thought it was, and I remember. I think I might have scrolled past an article about that, but yeah, like I think I think you're right. I think this film is definitely the more comedic of the three, which is weird because I
Mhm.
also think it's the more like it's kind of the most serious as well in the sense. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's kind of like it sort of balances like the humor with like really like intense action, sometimes a lot really brutal action as well in here. And I love
Yeah,
that it just doesn't hold back in terms of comedy or action at all. It's just full on what you see is what you get. I love that.
yeah, because like they are obviously like Nicholas Angel is a very serious character, but they then set him in this like stupid over the top world to sort of contrast that and satirize it. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think
it's a
this
really
film
good
is
point.
it's not only the funniest, but I think it's also the smartest of the trilogy.
Yeah.
But we obviously don't want to continue like going through being like this joke was funny, this joke was funny.
Yeah.
But I do want to just mention my absolute favorite one that I look
Go
forward
for
to
it.
on every single watch, and I'm giddy to see it. It's the moment where Nicholas Angel is in the pub and then it pans over to the group of teenagers,
Yes, I
and
had
like
the
the
exact.
glint of the braces blinds him.
Yeah, man, I had the exact same notes. It's that whole scene where he asks them like, "What's your date of birth?" and stuff. It's absolutely hilarious. Like, it's that is one of the more funny gags I've seen in a while. And I think Nicolas Angel might be one of my favorite cinematic characters in recent years. I think because he takes himself so seriously. Like, I just love it so much. Like, it's sort of what you said it perfect. Like, it's sort of perfectly balanced with like the over the top environment that he's set in. Like he's like he's like arresting like he's like kicking teenagers out of pubs for being underage. He's obviously that's probably fair enough. But like
Mm.
like he's just a really over the top character. I love it so much. And yeah, I mean that gag just brings a massive smile to my face instantly. It's great.
And we talk about how serious he's been, and the world that he's in, and it's very clear that he's married to his job as a police officer. But when he moves to Sanford, I feel like the integrity of the job that he has is lost. So you would think, if he was so desperate to be a police officer, but he wants to be the right kind of police officer, you would think he would rather change professions, if he had to, rather than work in an environment that sort of makes a mockery of like his formal professional prowess.
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually. Yeah, because you sort of see at the start of the film, don't you, that like he's passed every exam, like with top marks, physical exams and stuff like that, and like he's clearly like an expert in every field of the police. So it's actually a really good point, actually. Yeah, and maybe that's a testament to like how, like even as that Nicholas Angel character is characterized, like Simon Pegg is such a versatile actor, isn't he? I mean, he could do
Mhm.
everything: comedy, serious action, Star Trek, everything. Like he's great.
And Timothy Dalton also stars in this film, playing Simon Skinner, the owner of the
Oh yeah,
local supermarket, and he gives one of my favorite villain performances of all
I
time.
agree.
Frequently he portrays sort of like morally corrupt characters in Chuck, the James Bond films, because
Doctor
James
Who.
Bond is famously a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Doctor Who, but he's rarely an outright villain. He's usually sort of a charismatic dickhead, uh, because he's an incredibly charming man, but I feel like there's just something sinister behind the eyes that just means he can't play an
Yes.
like an outright good guy.
Yeah, he looks evil in a sense. Like he looks he's got like a master plan, and that's why I love this movie so much. Like we've sort of spoke before about the environment. It's like it's a really like rural village, and the fact that like the big bad is like the owner of like a supermarket branch is absolutely hilarious. Like that's so great. And I don't know, I have so much love for this film because the area really reminds me of where I used to live. So it does, like, it really heavily reminds me of
Mm.
that. And yeah, like I think some of the it doesn't he doesn't give my favorite actually no, he might give my favorite performance in the film, but one of my favorite sort of cameos in the film, we've mentioned Kate Blanchett, is actually Stephen Merchant as the farmer who's lost his
Oh
swan. That
yeah.
is absolutely brilliant. I love that, and that's kind of like a recurring gag throughout the film, that the swan is like,
Mm.
the hero of the film. Like I think he like attacks the bad policeman at the end. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, well, when it comes to recurring gags, because we've sort of talked about like visual ones, but when
Yeah.
it comes to like the foreshadowing of it, I feel like Aaron A. Aronson is my favorite. Where
Yeah.
he just sees like the annoying ginger child, and he's just like, "What's your name?" Aaron A. Aronson, sir. Like
Yeah.
it's so good.
Yeah, I know, it's so great. It's so good. I mean, this movie,
Uh,
there's so
one
many
t-
quotable
one
moments,
like
isn't there?
tiny thing within the film that just happens within the narrative that I just quickly wanted to mention, because it just pissed me off, if I'm honest. Obviously we eventually learn that Simon Skinner is amongst like the killers of the village, but whenever there's the village fair going on, he loses the raffle just because he's gone off for a piss. They're
Yeah,
just
that's what I'm
like,
about to
oh
say.
yeah, oh
Mate,
yeah,
you've missed out.
let's deploy another number.
Literally, like it kind of gets me thinking. Like we've reviewed Knives Out in the channel before, and one thing I really like about movies like that, sort of mystery films, is that like,
I mean, we did not review Knives
sorry, no, we
Out.
haven't reviewed it on the channels before. We've seen it before. We've seen it.
We've seen it.
Did we see it together? Yeah, we did, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we'll review it someday. But about
Yeah.
that one thing I love about those kind of mystery films is when, you know, it builds up to this kind of master scheme and stuff like that, where and then the film actually shows you what happens and like what actually happens. So in this film we kind of see that, yes, obviously, Mr. Skinner was one of the hooded figures, but the fact that there's multiple, so you see when, like, Nicholas is chasing after one, there's actually one that's hiding behind the hedge and stuff, and one of them's running on, so that there's multiple, clearly. And yeah, I think the fact that this movie is so clever, and the fact that it kind of presents like it sort of lingers on certain characters for a while, that makes you think, oh yeah, okay, something's going to be up here. But one thing that kind of spoiled it for me, because I remember watching it, is because it's been a while since I watched it, so I kind of forgot who was the big bad, I'll be honest. So it's when Nicholas comes into the Sanford village and looks at the fountain, and you can see like the names, and I just glimpsed the name of Mr. Skinner. And when that character's introduced like 2 minutes later, I was like, oh, he's gonna be the villain. I was like, damn it, I spoiled it for myself again. But that being said, I love like the subtle clues in there. You can definitely spot it, can't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely the genius of it. That it gives you a
Absolutely.
lot of the answers like halfway through the film. But it continues to keep you guessing, and then they shock you with the revelation that it's like the village-wide conspiracy. But the as you sort of mentioned, like Angel sort of presents this very complex version of events.
Yeah.
Where he's talking about like real estate and like a conspiracy around the bypass that was meant to go through the village. And quite honestly, whenever he was explaining, I got a bit lost, and the fact that that's like just completely binned
Yeah,
for
I
just the
love it.
fact that they like thought that they were like terrible at their job, or something similar. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, I think that the fact that the NWA's plan is so ridiculous, that they just wanted,
I love, like, I
they
did
just
not
wanted
realize
Village
until
of the
the end of the
Year.
film that they were the NWA, which
Yeah.
is just hilarious.
Yeah, like they just wanted, what was it, like they just wanted to be Village of the Year, so they like so they decided to kill off everyone that was like everyone that was like maybe would have been a bit a bit sort of weird in the town. Like we see the like, what is it, like the living statue guy. We see that he's in like the basement, he's been killed and stuff like that. So it is hilarious. I mean, it kind of gets me thinking, like they could have just paid the people who do that competition off. Like you could have just paid the millions and just said, yeah, just give us Village of the Year or something like that. But anyway, the fact that
I
it's so
guess murder's
ridiculous,
just easier.
it's just easier. Yeah, it just adds to the charm there, doesn't it? Like it's just fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the corrupt, like, like chief of police, like it is fairly easy in a small town to commit murder, I would
Yeah,
think.
that's true. That's true.
It was only the only reason that they're ever caught is the outsourcing, of someone from outside the village.
Yeah.
But we talked about them sort of like murdering like the nuisances around town, and I would say that Tim Messenger's death is maybe one of my favorite in film history,
It's so good, isn't it? It's so brutal. Like it is, like when you know
because it just
the spy gets.
eviscerates his entire body.
Yeah, I know, and like I love the fact that character, like you kind of this film sort of presents characters who you think will be villainous, but by the end they're actually fine. No, Tim Messenger was actually uncovering that story, I think, wasn't he, or something to
Hmm.
that degree. And then we also see like the two twins in the
Well, that
police.
yeah, that was sort of like in like Nicholas Angel's like complex perspective of it. It was that he was killed for uncovering that secret, but it was just because he has a bunch of typos in his work.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, 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 actually, yeah. And like, and the two twins in the police force, like you kind of think, oh, they really hate the Nicholas Angel character, so you think they'll be behind it, but they're not. Olivia Colman's character, who's one of my favorites in the film, like every line of
Hmm.
hers is just like a dirty innuendo, isn't it? Like that's all it is. But yeah, like I just love how the film just subverts your expectations in so many ways, but also it doesn't. Like the characters who you think will be the villains are actually the villains, but not all of them, if you know what I mean. Like, I'll use an
Yeah,
example. Like, the woman who gets killed by like the garden snippers.
yeah.
Yeah, I actually thought she was going to be a villain in the film, but she's actually not. I don't think. I think she's just a normal
No,
citizen.
she's not. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, it is pretty much a toss up of like which old person is going to be
yeah,
on this sort of like murder committee. But I do love that they give you a lot of answers up front. But yeah, they
they do.
they, they do
Yeah,
keep you guessing.
they
Like
do.
I think you can tell pretty early on that it's not just one person, but knowing who's responsible and who's not is more of a question.
Yeah.
I don't think going into it I would have ever I don't think the thought ever would have occurred to me that it was Danny's dad sort of at the head of it.
Yeah, and we'll have to mention the Danny character here. We're big movie fans, of course. His DVD collection is marvelous, isn't it? So good.
It is so delightful, and I think that this is maybe my favorite Simon Pegg and Nick Frost pairing, of
Yeah,
characters, because obviously it feels like in The World's End they're barely friends, and then in Shaun of the Dead, I feel like Ed's maybe just a bit too unpleasant to really root for, but here I think they're just both lovely.
I agree 100%, and I think one thing about this film I really love is that it just it just descends into all out war by the end. It
Yeah.
just becomes a action film. And the fact that we see like Nicholas Angel is like he's kicking old women in the face. It's fantastic. It's so well done. And the fact that like I think it is so ridiculous, but of course it's like intentionally ridiculous. So it's kind of that
Yeah.
comedy again where you can't really criticize it, but it's just fantastic. It's so good, so well done.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like normally I wouldn't be a fan of that kind of like absurdist humor, but like the entire third act is magical. Like
Yeah,
I've never seen that many pensioners in a gunfight, especially just because like they sort of set that up with the phrase that like everyone and their mom has a gun,
yeah,
and then
yeah. They
you
do,
see
don't
the
they?
farmer and then the farmer's mom with a gun, but then the entire village is just locked and loaded. Like
Yeah,
it
literally.
is
Yeah,
crazy to
yeah.
see.
I know. I love it.
And but I am also like a fan of bloody action, so it was sort of just like
Yeah.
my ideal film ending. But like it just felt so fitting of the film's tone that like nobody is killed in the shootout. Even Skinner, who's like pierced on that spire, he still
Oh,
makes it out alive.
yeah. I know. I know. I love that, and it kind of reminds me of what Kingsman is as well, and it kind of makes me think like Kingsman might have robbed a lot from this film. You know what I mean? Just in terms of the action, and just in terms of like just the themes of it as well. Like it makes me sort of look at that, not necessarily dislike those films a bit more, but kind of consider the originality of this one. And it kind of gets me thinking. There's one of my favorite running gags in these films is the scenes where the characters have to jump over a fence. We see in the first one, I think, where Shaun, like, he tries to jump over a fence, but like the first fence just collapses on him or something, isn't it? And then
I think so,
in
yeah.
this film, like, he does it, and then Danny just tries to do it. I just he just flies straight through the fence. It's absolutely great. And then obviously the world's end. It's great as well. But I mean, yeah, like the recurring gags in these films, obviously the Cornetto as well. It's just awesome. It's so good. I just nothing but positive things from me.
And we've talked about how we like the character that Nick Frost plays, but if we talk
Yeah.
about sort of that how that differs from his normal sort of character, I'm very used to like Nick Frost playing sort of like the lovable doofus,
Yeah.
and here I really like the bromance that's presented.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think it would have been better had he been the mastermind behind the whole plot?
I don't know. I think that's a really interesting turn of it. Like if it turns out he was actually involved, I think that would have been really funny. But I don't know. I kind of like the way it went down in the end. But it's a really interesting version there. What about yourself, man? What do you think?
Well, he does obviously play like a very small part, but he's oblivious to the actual like murderous intentions of the group.
Hmm.
So I was sort of like gutted whenever I watched it for the first time, because you sort of see his apparent betrayal, but it turns out he's like faked the stabbing and he's trying to let Nicholas go free.
Yeah.
But that moment did kill me whenever I watched it the first
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I know what you
But
mean.
I do think there would have been something special about sort of a complete turn, like a usual suspect style. You
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
expectation of this character and then they flip entirely, because that doesn't happen too much in cinema, and I feel like it would have been fitting of this film.
Hmm.
But I feel like the quality of the bromance, the quality of the bromance is worth the
Yeah.
potential originality of the narrative.
I think so. I think so. Uh, this will be an unusual point for me to make, but it holds merit. We've seen it in The Simpsons before. It's predicted certain things in terms of Donald Trump's presidency. A one line that
Mm.
makes it in here is when Danny's father goes, we're gonna win this, Village of the Year and make Sanford great again. I was like, Donald Trump's definitely
Yeah,
next
yeah.
for his presidency, but yeah, it's kind of weird when films make sort of references that sort of cause deja vu, even though this came out sort of like nearly a decade before that actually was said. So it's so
Mhm.
strange. Like maybe in somehow that did influence Donald Trump. I mean, it's unlikely, but you never know. But
Yeah.
but yeah, any more remarks from you, bud?
No, nothing else for me. No.
I'd love to hear your rating for this one.
So, even irrespective of the fact that this is, in my opinion, the best of the trilogy, this is also one of my favorite films of all time.
Agreed.
It'd
Mine
probably
too.
be, just maybe in the 11 or 12 slot, just trying to come into the top 10. But I just think, I think it's perfection. Like, I don't think there's anything that you can fault within this film. I think there are things that could be different, and they may have been better or worse or whatever. But I had some thoughts that, oh, maybe this could change, maybe that'd be a good idea. But there's nothing actually wrong with this film. So I have to give it a 10 out of 10. I feel like I'd be
Yeah,
lying
I love that.
otherwise.
I love that, buddy. I'm exactly the same. This is one of my favorite films of all time. Certainly, probably one of my favorite action films of all time, if you could call it that. And yeah, I mean, what's not to love? Amazing script, unreal editing. Like I said, I'm a big sucker for sort of like village murder mystery stuff, especially in the countryside. So yeah, I love that element. And yeah, 10 out of 10 for me, absolutely perfection. Uh, Now, just before actually we move on to The World's End, you know the film Paul, starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost? Is that
Yeah,
any relation to these films? I take it it's not.
none whatsoever. It's not directed by Edgar Wright. No connection to these films, and
Yeah.
it's not good. So I don't think they should claim it,
Yeah.
even if it
Yeah.
was made by Edgar Wright.
Anyway, on to The World's End. Now, this is one film I think we sort of said at the start of this podcast that we kind of had a lukewarm reception to it on our first viewing. I remember when I
Mm,
first watched this film, I think I might have watched a different film to this because this film did not open the way I remembered it opening, but maybe I was just me not
no.
paying attention to it. But it's such a different film that I remember it being, and I'm so glad I stuck with it until the end because this is my second favorite of the three, actually.
Ooh.
I
Oh,
know.
really? Like Shaun of the Dead has gone right to the bottom of the
Yeah,
pile, has
it's
it?
weird because I said to you at the start of this, mate, when you said we're going to review the Cornetto Trilogy, we sort of said, which one's your favorite off the bat. I said Shaun of the Dead, and I kind of obviously I love that film, but I think that's a testament to how strong these other two are for me anyway. I think
Mm.
all of these films are unreal. It's one of the best trilogies of all time, I think. But here, The World's End it blew me away. Actually, it's one of the most surprising films I've watched ever.
Yeah, I mean, if someone said to me The World's End, I think Aliens, but then they only show up halfway through the film. Like the first half is a completely different movie. I mean, in my opinion, a much better movie.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we'll get onto that.
Hmm.
But first, I just wanted to ask you something plain and simple.
Go for
This
it.
film is about the Golden Mile. Where Gary and his buddies are trying to go across 12 pubs, 12 pints and 12 pubs. So I just wanted to ask you, Matthew, now that we're relatively fresh into adulthood, but what kind of drinking establishment do you favor?
It kind of got me thinking, buddy. I would love to do something like this with you, even though I hate
Yeah,
beer and lager. I would
yeah,
absolutely
I
love to
hate
do
beer as
this.
well.
Would you not love to do this though? It sounds so fun.
I definitely would. I think I like the idea of one drink in each pub. I think that's usually the idea. Especially with pub golf.
Yes, yeah.
You're just doing one drink in the place. If we don't want to drink pints, I would love to do this. I mean, we've experienced bars and clubs and pubs. Which is your favorite? Would you say?
Definitely bars. Well, are bars and
Okay, okay.
pubs the same thing?
No, like bars have sort of this. Bars are like music, lights, but there's no dancing, and then like pubs are like going down to your local for a pint.
Then in that case, I'd say probably I don't know because I like the bar. I like bars in the sense that I love the fact that you can meet new people there. You can whereas in a pub and you can obviously meet new people in a pub, but for me, I think a pub to me anyway is like everyone sits in the same place every Friday night. Do you know what I mean? Like you come in,
Yeah,
hello Jimmy, hello Sam. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So it's kind of like
yeah,
and I think pubs are more of a culture over where we are anyway, especially because of that sense that I don't know because the pubs in this sense like it kind of reminded me of where I grew up as well and sort of that sort of
mm,
like countryside aesthetic where everyone like I said everyone sits in the same place every Friday night kind of pub and but yeah I don't know I think my heart says pub but my brain's saying bars. What about you?
Well, I was firm on the opinion for years that I would absolutely detest clubs. And I walked into one of my first clubs, and I was like, I fucking hate this. But when it came to the second or third time, I was like, I'm loving this.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Because obviously, I'm not too shy on the drink. So I'm usually having a great time.
Mhm.
And so sometimes whenever we went to bars, I was just a bit miserable. I mean, for my birthday, we went to, one of Belfast's trendy bars,
We
and
did, yeah.
it was decent. But like I feel like if you're at a drinking establishment, you can't be sober. which is
Yeah,
obviously what you're contending with frequently.
that's
Like,
it.
are you still able to enjoy yourself?
Yeah, well, that's it. I think I'm coming around to alcohol a bit more now. Uh,
Oh,
but yeah, I know. But but yeah, like I think the sort of the pub dynamic that it's sort of displayed in this film, it's like perfect for me. Like I would absolutely love that, especially like you said, one drink doesn't seem too much, but overall, like 12 pints in 12 different pubs, that sounds like a real accomplishment. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think he actually manages to get the 12th pint in by the end. He doesn't manage to do the cold mild. Sure, he doesn't.
no, that infuriated me
That
so
really pisses
much.
me
I'm like,
off. Yeah.
because, like, obviously he's put his mates through a lot, and it's been a traumatic experience. But like, why can't you give him like one sliver of a good thing? Like, if that's really all that he's wanted for all these years, how can you deprive him of that? Like, it just felt so cruel for Mandy.
Yeah, it
Like, and
did, didn't it?
he continues to like be his best friend by the end. They don't see each other for many years, but like, they end the film on good terms, and it felt cruel to me.
Yeah, it did. It did. It's weird. You mentioned sort of Nick Frost there. I think it's so strange seeing Nick Frost not be a comedic character for the most part of this film.
Hmm.
Obviously, he really comes into his own with the action scenes. It's so Kingsman-esque. It's so brutal, and it's some of my favorite action in any film ever because like it actually shows you the action. It's CGI done well. It's quick. It's snappy. It's great. But yeah, it's so weird seeing Nick Frost not be like an Ed or like a or what's his name in Hot Fuzz, Danny. It's weird seeing him not
Hmm.
be that kind of character. I don't know if you
Yeah,
agree.
yeah. I mean, as you said, I definitely agree with the action sequence. The action sequences. That them being great.
Mm.
I think the highlight is obviously the bathroom fight. I think it's incredibly choreographed, and I think like the human replacement blue blood and like sort of the doll bodies where their heads like
Yeah,
pop
yeah,
off,
yeah, and they can like attach them
from
back
like
on
the
again.
the
Yeah,
neck joint.
yeah, for
I
sure.
I I, I think that's just such a good creature effect.
Yeah,
Because we because I mean they aren't strictly aliens. They're sort of like
replicants kind of
synthetic
thing. Yeah,
human replacements by the aliens. But when it comes to sort of like creature effects, I'm normally not a massive fan. I mean, obviously, from like aliens, from decades ago, this sort of xenomorphs are a great design. But I haven't really seen anything too original since then. Sort
yeah,
of like Ken doll, like neck joint, like was just really cool. I thought
yeah. I
really
agree,
original.
100%, 100%. But
And this film, I think, continues the idea that's sort of proposed by a lot of films, especially like high school films, that school is the best days of your life. And I fucking hope not. Like that's just a miserable idea. That like the times that you've had in school are meant to be the best of your life. Like that's tragic. If
yeah,
if if
I
true.
know. I think the fact that yeah, this film probably presents the more sort of the midlife crisis aspect, sort of similar to how Shaun of the Dead did, and I absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. But it kind of got me thinking. Yeah, I hope not. Like I hope it's not that. Maybe for Gary King it might have been, but I don't know he's kind of presented as like this nomad maverick and stuff in the film, and I actually think I actually like sort of like by the end of the film you kind of get more and more of his real personality. Like it's kind of like a character he's kind of playing in
Mm,
that sense as well. And I think it's definitely Simon Pegg's best performance out of the three, actually, for me anyway.
I think so. Yeah, I don't think that this film is the best. Well, I mean, in my opinion, it's the third best. I think it's cruel to say this is the worst because I think it's still a good film,
Yeah,
but it's my least favorite of the three. But I think I would 100% agree with you. This is by far Simon Pegg's greatest performance. I think it's a truly tragic character, and like for me, I wholeheartedly believed him when he said that the Golden Mile is all that he has,
yeah,
and it's just a tragic concept. But like he feels because obviously he's a character that he's difficult to tolerate, and he sort of pushes people away, but all he wants is human connection. All he wants is his friends to come back and relive his glory days. And it is just a tragic character who's just not moved past these
yeah.
days of being young, and it's sad.
Yeah, I love what you said there, buddy. It's kind of echoing what I was feeling, to be honest. I think you've put that really well. And for me, yeah, I actually would have loved if the film if he ends up, he meets like a really nice woman who like embraces him and
Mm,
sort of understands who he is. Because obviously we see I think is it Sam and Steven or something? Steven is his name.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, like we
Yeah,
see that they like I actually do quite like it. And it's weird because I think it would have been nice to have that sort of female counterpart for Gary King in this film. I think it would have really sort of helped his character progression throughout the film as well. Maybe that's because I'm a sucker for rom-coms and meet cutes and stuff like that. But anyway, this film, out of all of the three, it reminded me most of It Chapter 2. Now, that's a very weird comparison, I think. But I don't know. Do you think it holds merit? Because it's kind of all these older characters, there's a romance
Yeah,
in there that sort of wasn't, sort of has brought across until adulthood. And of course, it's kind of like them fighting like an alien invasion, so to speak, as well. It really reminded me of It Chapter 2, actually. And that's maybe
yeah.
why I like it so much.
I mean, it's a much better film than It Chapter
It
Two.
is. No, it's much better.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely do see that. Especially with sort of the reflection on childhood and past trauma. I definitely do think that carries weight. And we've talked a lot about it before because obviously, Shaun of the Dead is a zombie film with a twist.
Yeah.
Then Hot Fuzz is like a police crime film with a twist. This film was, of course, an alien film with a twist.
Yeah.
So clearly, genre pieces with a twist are where Wright normally shines. But for me, my favorite thing about this film were the group scenes in the first act, and I was absolutely dreading the arrival of the aliens because I knew that would be where the film for me derails.
It does. It does.
This film is by far so much better than I remember, but I just feel like this film would have been so much better had it just been like a poignant tragic comedy about dealing with trauma.
Yeah. I
I I
100%
feel
agree.
like just
100%.
a road trip film would have been good enough.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. It kind of feels like two different films between the first sort of two thirds and the last third, for me anyway. It kind of derails. I think. I think you're right, buddy. And I really love the dynamic between Martin Freeman, Nick Frost, and Simon Pegg, and then the other dudes in there as well. They're all great. And forgive me, I don't know their names. I
I
forgot.
don't know their names either. I'm sorry.
But do you know what I mean, buddy? It's not how I would imagine like for example, if we take the opening sort of early young version of themselves cast, it's not how I would imagine them how they would act and be in the future. But I think that's kind of like the humor in there. The only one that isn't like a serious businessman is Gary King. Like he still wears the same trench coat with the shades on. He's got the slick back black hair. I think it's so well done, and the fact that all the other four, really like businessmen. One of them's real estate, one of them's cars, one of them is I think like a lawyer, I think as well. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really well done. And like you mentioned the word tragic comedy in there. Now it's been a while since we've done the Winter's Tale, but there's a fantastic Winter's Tale reference in
Yes.
here that I wish I would have remembered when we studied that play. Oh my god, I was devastated. It's so well done, isn't it? Exit pursued by a bear.
I mean, that is currently the name of our
English group chat.
English group chat, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it is an excellent reference, and I sort of did want to message into that group chat during that, but I was like, nah, I'm antisocial. So yeah, maybe not. But
It's been a
if
while.
you haven't seen The
Yeah,
World's End, English group chat, go right ahead. There's
absolutely.
a great reference for you.
Yeah.
But I was very glad by the end because the ending is really not my cup of tea. I
No,
either
me neither.
prefer completely bleak, world ending, how I
Yeah.
would have liked the MCU to end with Thanos snapping his fingers and everyone being dead.
Sure.
I would have loved that. Whereas, I would either love a complete, as you sort of said, it was nice that Edgar Wright doesn't do this, but sort of a neat bow on top. I like that, or I like complete tragedy. Here, it does something in between where they're all left alive, but they're in this apocalyptic wasteland.
Yeah, it's like
And
the
I don't
Dark
know, they
Ages.
just all seem completely out of character. Gary King clearly he wants to live his glory days again, but I feel like he wanted to do that with his friends as they were. I felt it felt out of character for him to go back and befriend the fake young versions of his friends. It felt inauthentic to me.
Yeah, and it's kind of a bummer, like because obviously technology has been wiped out by this alien called the Network. Like, there's no hope of them ever finding each other again, really, is there? Unless it was like a really great
Uh-huh.
coincidence that they all met up again. Like, because there's no internet, there's no GPS, there's no navigation. It's impossible for them really to find each other again, really. And it's kind of a bummer because like it kind of obviously I suppose that is part of the humor that it's like there's like a nuclear event that causes the Dark Ages. Like that is part of like it's so ridiculous, but I think this is maybe one instance where it maybe doesn't work how I think Edgar Wright maybe wanted it to work. I think for me, it feels really out of place with the film. And I know that maybe sounds a bit unfair given that, you know, it's an alien invasion film, but I don't know. I even thought the fact that the aliens sort of gave up and said, "Oh, I can't be bothered arguing with you," but then they decide to blow the whole town up. I thought that was really cruel. Like I thought that was absolutely awful.
I think it was just that maybe their spaceship was like deep rooted into the Earth's core, and then pulling it out of the Earth destroyed it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, probably. It makes more sense than what I just said.
I,
But
yeah, I think it was the takeoff of their ship, but yeah, I agree. It felt out of place.
yeah, I think I just would have liked it if Gary settles, like he's the only one out of the four I think who doesn't have a relationship with at some stage. You know, we obviously we see by the end that Ed has rekindled his relationship with his wife, but well, not Ed. What's his name? Andrew. Yeah, Andy.
Andy, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the fact I would have loved if Gary, you know, meets a nice girl or something like that, or it ends up, you know, that he does get to you know, complete the golden mile or something like that. You know, obviously we see by the end that he's teetotal, I think. So and it's kind of that, you know, we've talked before in the podcast earlier, said this is probably the most emotional you know, film. And I think that really stands true when you say that, you know, he doesn't want to show his wrist, because I assume like he's been cutting his wrists. Like it's
Hmm.
a really dark sort of emotional scene. I actually think that's why the Gary King is character is so brilliant. Like he's so likable. Like he's clearly a vulnerable character who, you know, he's you know, what do you call that? He's in at the start of the movie where like he's sharing. Is it like Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that? Is it called?
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely doing like a group a group therapy situation, and you know we don't really grasp the full context of that, but you know we assume
Yeah.
it's because of a failed suicide attempt.
It's really
And
heartbreaking,
yeah, I
actually.
agree, because this film is, you know, shorter than the other two films, but I feel like, you know, for the fact that this probably has the least dialogue, like the least interpersonal dialogue, for somehow it manages to have a main character with more depth than the other films. You know, Gary
Yeah.
King isn't necessarily the most likable of the three. I would sort of agree with you that it's Nicholas Angel. But you know, in this film, I feel like he has more depth than any character
I
in any of the
agree.
other films.
No, I absolutely agree, but absolutely. And it's I think this film has the best script as well. Like some of the gags in here are absolutely
Oh,
brilliant. I think
mm,
you probably disagree. Like that's fair enough. Of course, they're all
yeah.
fantastic scripts, but for me, I think it's the best script. But I don't know, like it's a subtle. It has sort of has the similar subtle clues to what's going to happen. You know, we see Martin Freeman's character go off to the bathroom, and but it's revealed that he's probably been killed in that bathroom or something. You know what I mean? Like, because he's
Mm,
replaced by this sort of replicant, sort of blank, I think they call him. But
yeah.
yeah, like it's kind of heartbreaking as well. Like you never really see the true Martin Freeman character again. Like those characters are you never know what happens to them, really, do you? Like he's just been probably killed off
Yeah.
screen.
Well, yeah, they've been mulched, as
Yeah,
we're told by the
yeah,
network.
yeah,
But you know, the one bright spark of the ending is the nice little nugget of information that Sam and Steven got together, which
absolutely.
I think it feels right. You know,
Yeah,
the rest is a bit too bleak for me to appreciate, but I'm glad that those two characters got together, because Sam and Gary just like was not a pair that could have worked, and I'm glad that the film
yeah.
sort of had the self awareness to recognize that.
100%, 100%. But I think you're right. Any more remarks from you?
Well, if you don't have anything further to say, Matthew, I'd like to hear your rating of the film.
Well, like I said, this is my second favorite, which definitely it's really surprised me. I love the Gary King character, probably Simon Pegg's best performance. I kind of I love the sense, sort of similar to the sense that it's like the Hot Fuzz, that sort of like rural country environment where it's sort of instead of Sanford, it's this, I think it's like Newton Haven or something. It's called,
Mm.
and I love that sort of scenario. The Golden Mile seems like a really fun thing to do in real life as well. And yeah, I mean, the ending definitely spoils it a little bit for me, but I'd still give it a 9.5. It's one of my favorites I've seen in a while. What about yourself, bud? What about yourself?
Well, for me, you know, the things that I loved most about Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz were the script. You know,
Yeah.
it was the visual humor that was echoed through the foreshadowing within the script, the structure and the comedy. What were, you know, things that were integral to the success of those films. And here, I would say that this is for me the least funny of the three, and like the least well thought
Fair
out
enough.
script.
Hmm.
And you know, I think that this is where it's perhaps unfair to compare it to the other films in the trilogy. You know, and it's maybe fair to just assess its quality as its own thing. Because for me, it is my least favorite of the three, but I think independent of the other two, it sort of shines as a better film than it would be if I was rating it against the other two. So I would probably give it probably an 8.5
Nice one,
out of
yeah.
10. I think it's a perfectly admirable film, a lot better than I remember. I do feel that the ending lets it down, and I feel like with Bolt, where like the beginning of the film, sort of showcases a better film,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
it's a
sort
good
of
point. Yeah,
subverts
yeah, for
that,
sure.
and sort of
Yeah.
betrays, you as an audience, because I've seen a lot of like really great road trip films, that's just like a poignant thing about like people's depressing pasts. And I think if Edgar Wright had sort of just leaned away from wanting to do a big spectacle piece, I feel like it could have been a really tragic, poignant film that would have like probably made me like burst into tears, because
Yeah,
I think Stephen, sorry, fuck my life, I think Simon Pegg gives
Stephen King.
such a beautiful performance.
Yeah.
I think in a different film, where he's the sole focus is him dealing with trauma, and how he has nothing left to live for in his current life. I feel like that maybe would have been a better film for me anyway.
Yeah, I think the fact that Simon Pegg has dealt with issues such as alcoholism before in his personal life, he really sort of put everything into this character. I think you could definitely see that. I mean, it's my favorite performance of his that I've seen, and it stands to reason. Like this trilogy is one of the best I think in recent years, in terms of consistency, humor, action, just in general. So I'm really glad we finished off the Cornetto trilogy. To be honest, I'm glad I watched them again. They have such great rewatchability to them as well. Of course, especially I think Hot Fuzz and Shaun of the Dead. But yeah,
Yeah,
just before we conclude today's episode, Bud, do you want to go into a little bit of future episode chat to tell the viewers what's going to be coming up in the next week or two?
yes. So we've
Nice
just
one.
recently recorded an episode on superhero characters, specifically side characters that we could beat up.
Yeah.
I don't know when that'll have gone up, whether that'll have gone up before this or after or whatever. But either look out for that or go and check that out if it's up
Yeah.
already. It was a really fun one to record,
It was a good
and
one.
I think you guys will like it. We also are probably moving into more mini reviews this year, because as I mentioned before, Netflix is releasing a movie a week, which
Mhm.
is already a stressful idea, along with all
Big
the ones
commitment.
that are planning to come out theatrically. Although I'd say a lot of the ones that are planning to come out theatrically this year are not coming out this year.
Yeah.
I mean, already Morbius was moved from March to
Yeah, I heard about
October.
that. Yeah, I know.
That
Bummer.
was a real shame, because I
Yeah,
was really looking forward to that film,
I
quite
know.
honestly.
No.
But I mean, maybe if it sort of involves like Vulture, maybe it'll be a bit more fitting to be closer to Spider-Man 3.
Maybe actually, yeah, good point.
But
Yeah.
we'll be doing a overdue review of Freaky, the Vince Vaughn and Catherine Newton film, where they switch bodies. I'm really looking forward to that. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow, and that should be up soon. Was there anything
I think
else
we're
that was sort of coming up in the near future?
I think we're doing one division premiere of the first two episodes this weekend as
Hmm.
well. That should be up soon. And then I suppose that take us into next week, buddy. I suppose Disney Part 13, stuff like that. We'll be doing as
Yeah,
well.
I
So
think what is it? It's called Stardust, isn't it?
Stardust,
The
yeah,
the
yeah,
new
yeah. Hmm.
the new David Bowie biopic.
Yeah.
Is it Stardust?
It's something like
Have
that.
I,
I'll have a wee look here. I'll
or
have
is
a wee
it
look. And
Starman?
then I think we're
I
also doing
I think it's Stardust, but also that's just stealing the name of the 2007 film.
with Charlie Cox, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Is are we also going to be doing then? Yeah, it's called Stardust. Yeah. Are we also?
yeah.
Excuse me. We're also going to be doing the Godfather films as well,
Oh
aren't we?
yes.
So that's going to be a good
Yeah,
one.
I would say probably the week after next
Yeah.
will be the Godfather trilogy. One that I don't think you haven't seen any of them,
Haven't
have
seen
you?
any of them. No, haven't seen any of them. Another Marlon
Me
Brando
neither.
3, so that's gonna be good.
Oh no. Yeah, I mean, we've obviously gotten very well affiliated with Marlon Brando and Robert De Niro.
Yes.
In recent months, so I think it'll probably be a better watch now that we're sort of more familiar with the genre.
Yeah. Well, listen, mate. Thanks very much for your time today. Really enjoyed watching those three films, and thanks everyone for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. As always, please be sure to like, subscribe, comment your thoughts down below, all that good stuff. And yeah, hope you guys are all safe and well. Hope your family and friends are all safe and well. Take care, everyone, and bye bye.
Bye bye.